Hey everyone, it's Michael Kikle. I hope you're doing well today, and I have a review here for Star Wars Dark Disciple by Christie Golden. It also comes with a short story in the back from Christie Golden as well from a Star Wars magazine called Kindred Spirits. So this is a novel, for anybody who doesn't know, based on scripts for like the final season of the Clone Wars TV show. Now I know we have a new season of Clone Wars underneath Disney Plus, but you have to remember, Clone Wars, the newer Clone Wars cartoon, right before Rebels came out, was specifically made underneath George Lucas. It was one of the last things he worked on before he sold it, the whole property, the whole IP, to Disney. So Clone Wars, even though it's in Disney canon, is specifically a George Lucas creation that was actually mostly run underneath him, except for this most recent Season 7 or whatever it was. But anyway, Star Wars Dark Disciple, I would recommend personally, before I even get into the plot, if you're interested in this book after my review, or if you heard about it in passing from many people, because it seems like the fan reception for this, and shockingly so, is super, super positive, because I'm so used to me and everybody else hating every book that came out post-Disney buying Star Wars. And this book is like 10 years old now, since Disney bought them like, 2012 when they bought them? Anyway, I recommend watching the Clone Wars show before you even go near this book. It's not entirely necessary, but I think for the sake of character arcs, character relationships, especially with the main two characters in here, personally I think it's a big deal, and I think you should watch the show before you come to it. Now, I'll go ahead and talk about Dark Disciple. I guess what you could say is, again, this was technically going to be in the final season of Star Wars Clone Wars. Now, the thing with Clone Wars, the TV show, it started out horribly. Like, you had a really rough movie that came out in the theaters, an animated film, and I was so excited to see it. I remember the first time I saw the trailer for that film, I was so excited for it. Then the show came out. The movie was bad, the show came out, and the first two seasons of the show, when I finally checked them out on TV, they were rough. It was like standalone episodes, creature, feature, weekly episodes, whatever. Creature of the Week, Monster of the Week, whatever that's called. Wasn't very impressive. But if you go to like the end of Season 2 or Season 3 itself, it basically reboots entirely and does a little bit of a time jump, where like Ahsoka's a little bit older, so on and so on. And the show was amazing from that point on. Every episode was just fantastic. Except for every once in a while they'd put in like an arc about like C-3PO or Padme, and I don't give a shit about those characters and what they're doing. But when you have like the Jedi episodes or the Darth Maul episodes, because that was a big thing, it brought him back from the dead. That show was phenomenal. It really was. I haven't even seen the new Disney season, so I don't know if it's still good or not. But anyway, I recommend it highly if you haven't seen it. But a lot of the stuff were complete reboot, new canon at the time before Disney versions of characters like Asajj Ventress or General Grievous. They didn't change too much about General Grievous, but you have to understand a lot of these Clone Wars characters were originally defined not only by Lucas, but in the Dark Horse comics. And I read all of those. Every Clone Wars Dark Horse comic I read, and I loved the majority of them. They're phenomenal. If you haven't read those, check them out. Right before Revenge of the Sith came out, we had a Star Wars Clone Wars cartoon from, is it Genndy Tartakovsky? Is that how you say his name? The guy who did Samurai Jack and Dexter's Laboratory, and I'm a huge fan of his work. That Clone Wars cartoon may be my favorite thing from Star Wars, Clone Wars anything, even though it's clearly in a different timeline from the Clone Wars show we're talking about with this Dark Disciple book, and also the Dark Horse comics. None of those three can happen simultaneously. They just can't, because of characters like Asajj Ventress being in all three. Which brings me back to this book. Dark Disciple, I was not expecting what I got with this. Essentially, Quinlan Vos, who is another character who was changed quite a bit from his Dark Horse Comics Clone Wars I was going to say originality, but I guess I'll just say origin, where he was created at for those. Quinlan Vos was amazing. In this book, you follow him, just like you did a little bit in the Clone Wars show, and he's a little bit different. And this was before Disney, by the way, just so you remember. So this is not a Disney fuck-up, right? Quinlan Vos is just as cool, calm, and collected as he ever was, but in the Dark Horse comics, he like scowled a lot. He was very much like a Batman almost, but he was very cool. I loved him just in general. And in this book, the Jedi Council come to him, or I guess summon him to their chamber, and Yoda, Mace Windu, and the rest of the council basically tell him, hey, we're going to try something new to try to end this war, and we're doing something very un-Jedi-like to try to end this war with less death. We want you to go out and kill Count Dooku. We want you to assassinate his ass. And I gotta tell you, I was not expecting that. I went into this book knowing nothing. I saw lightsabers on the cover of the book, and I was thrilled to check it out. Didn't know what I was getting here, and I didn't know it was based on, episodes that had never been made of Clone Wars. And I gotta tell you, in the same vein of the Clone Wars TV show, this book in general was phenomenal. I loved it. I thought it was magnificent. Easily the best book released under Disney canon, even if it was written in George Lucas canon originally, before release. This was so emotionally engaging. It was so beautiful in a lot of ways, I have to tell you. And a lot of that is because it becomes a love story. Yes, a love story. They got Star Wars right, and frankly, Christy Golden's writing style fit this perfect. She apparently does a lot of Star Trek and Star Wars books, tie-ins, whatever, and she killed it. She killed it. She did so good. One of the best female writers for sci-fi, at least in my opinion, when it comes to Star Wars books. I don't read a whole lot of sci-fi outside of that, but from what I have read, she gets the voice of the universe of Star Wars perfect for here. You don't have to be too imposing like a Stephen King voice. She gets it perfect. The tone of the storytelling, she gets it perfect. The descriptions, everything. One of my biggest issues I run into with Star Wars books is that if it's not a comic and it's a novel or a short story, typically the problem I run into is that they describe things just by the name of what something's called, like a race of aliens or like a spaceship model. Like I'm supposed to fucking know what that looks like, and I know the general idea is, well, pull out your phone and Google it. Okay, I get that, but I'm not going to memorize throughout the whole book as I read it, because I'm a slow reader, what a dreadnought is or anything like that. I'm just not going to do that, so kiss my ass. She doesn't do that. She actually takes her time, describes these things quite a bit, and I love that. So Christy Golden, already right there, you're on a massive pedestal for me, and more writers need to be like you for this. So, I talked about the love story. How does it turn into a love story? Quinlan Vos feels like, and it seems like the Jedi felt like this too, the best way to get to Count Dooku was to go to his ex-apprentice at this point of the timeline of the Disney and George Lucas canon, to go to Asajj Ventress, his ex-apprentice. And so he does. And she is kind of teaching him, hey, you can't just use your, good boys Superman Jedi shit. You're going to have to go into some dark side usury to try to kill this guy, because, he's going to lie, cheat, and steal his way into killing you if you don't try to kill him first in a very deliberate, skilled fashion. And Quinlan kind of realizes, like, yeah, she's probably right. And it kind of draws him further and further into the dark side. I was not expecting this. And I understand where a lot of some fans on like Goodreads and stuff are coming from about Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos are so far out of what they were originally created as characters. Asajj Ventress was not some chick that could fall in love with a character. And I could see why a lot of people would look at these two versions of these characters from this Clone Wars show George Lucas made in his canon and say that it's almost fan-fiction-y. I could see where people are coming from if they say something like that, but it doesn't matter to me as long as it's good. Like, as long as it's well done, I'm cool with that. I'm fine with, like, a Darth Vader comic where he's more emotional after just losing Padme. I can take that. It seems out of character, but it's how it's handled. It's how the story itself is handled. This is a great example of this being held in a very high regard, and it's treated beautifully. I love that. This is not insulting. This is not political. It's nothing like that. The love story between these two kind of falling in love over time is beautiful. It really is very touching. And by the end of the book, it really had my kind of jaw on the ground, I'll tell you. If you have action scenes, which I was worried would not have a more common showing up in the book, let's say. I figured it'd be a lot of talking because it's a love story. No, there was a lot of action and stuff in this, just like the TV show has. The show has its emotional moments, its great character moments, but it really gets the action scenes, the lightsaber fights, all of that perfectly. And when Quinlan tries to address Count Dooku to kill his ass, there's some really tense moments in here that really had me gripping the book, dude. This book is about 350-something pages, and it flies by. It really does. I guess the last thing I can really talk about is the short story in the book. It's called Kindred Spirits. I think I mentioned that earlier in the review. It's also written by the same author, Christy Golden. And it's basically an Asajj Ventress short story before this book actually takes place. Basically her going on some kind of mystery treasure hunt with somebody, and it was okay. You know, not Christy Golden's fault, just kind of a random short story out there. It was fine. And it was cool to have that tacked onto this book. I guess it's the first time it's in print outside of the magazine it originally published in. That's pretty cool. But one more thing I forgot about Dark Disciples' actual novel. You know, this really had a lot of commentary about, like, what we consider to be the good guys. Like, for example, in World War II, I consider America the good guys, period. Plain and simple. I think everybody does, as well as everybody opposing Nazi Germany. This book was not political, but it delved into these themes about assassination and whether a good company or country should be allowed to even entertain the idea of doing something like this. I understand people would say it's out of character for the Jedi, but that wasn't the point. I don't think it is entirely out of the discussion of what the Jedi have tried to do in the midst of the Clone Wars to win this war. I think the Jedi Council just wanted to try it out. And by the way, there's a lot of Obi-Wan and Anakin in here too, later on in the book. That was great. They were really, really great. The voice for them was maintained perfectly by Christy Golden once again. But Obi-Wan really has some amazing moments in here as a character, and kind of opposing the Jedi Council sometimes, which he did a little bit in the Clone Wars TV show. A little bit of that, I think, is because of Qui-Gon Jinn, his old master, which is cool. But there are some great moments in here. I mean, just truly a great, great read. If you've not read Star Wars Dark Disciple, and again, if somebody's recommended it to you, maybe a friend, maybe somebody online, dude, take my word for it. This is one of the best books ever in Star Wars, from what I've read. And I haven't read a ton. I've probably read maybe 10 novels. Old canon, mainly. Legends canon, as it's called now. But a couple of Disney books that haven't been very good. Like, Lords of the Sith was fucking trash. I read the Luke Skywalker alien math book, and it was, oh my god, it was horrible. Lords of the Sith was slightly better than that, but that's about it. I've read a lot of Disney comics for their canon. Most of the comics suck now. Like, the earlier ones were really good, from the main line and from the Darth Vader book. But that's about it, man. But Dark Disciple technically counts as a Disney canon novel, and technically counts as a Disney release. But I'm going to tell you, it's phenomenal. I mean, it really is. You can tell this is pre-Disney, pre-involvement by them, even though it was released under them. It's fantastic. I think it's very, again, emotionally engaging, and it was beautiful. It was truly a beautiful read. And for a hardcore fan of the Clone Wars show like me, I recommend it to anybody else who has that same sentiment that I have about the show, which is most of the fan base, I would say. So definitely check it out. Star Wars Dark Disciple, humongously great read. If I had to give it a 5-star rating, or on a 5-star basis, I'd say, I would probably go ahead and go for the 5 out of 5 stars. I think it is fantastic, man. It's beautifully well done. And I wish this had been adapted. If it hasn't for Season 7, again, I don't think it was, but if it hasn't been, it deserves to be because of how good and engaging it was. I think even if you're looking for like a Christmas present for your kid that loves to read Star Wars books, take a glance when they're not home at their bookshelf, see if they don't have this book with the same cover that's on the screen here. And if you don't see it, get them this book. Trust me, if they love to read, if they love Star Wars books, they'll love this. Believe me. But they have to see the show, I would say, just a little bit, just to really get the context of these new versions of Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress characters. But anyway, what did you guys think about Dark Disciple? If you read it, did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you love the Clone Wars TV show from the newer years, not the old one I grew up on between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith? I'd love to hear all that down below, too. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.